Well, good morning, students. Hey, I'm really sorry that I can't be there yet again. Man, first semester's rough, just between tennis and all the stuff that's going on. But I really appreciate you guys bearing with me and all of that, and learning along with me in this. And today we've got a really good one, but it could be really dry if I made you guys just read the PowerPoint. So instead, I thought that I would use my pastor powers to come into our studio here and actually record the lecture for you guys, so that way you could hear it directly from me. So I'm gonna try and make this as normal as possible, if that makes sense. So I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you had a good weekend, and I hope you guys are having a good Monday so far in this kind of weird week. Seniors kind of get the Wednesday off, but for everybody else it's kind of a shorter day. So I'm looking forward to what we're doing this week. Today we've got a lecture. All right, this morning we have a lecture, but what we're doing at the end of the week is really fun. We're gonna get to actually get Illustrator, assuming that everybody can download it, and then we will actually start learning short keys and how to use different type tools and all that kind of stuff. Because today what we're talking about is the power of type. But just like normal, I have a dad joke for you. Are you guys ready? I pause. It's kind of like a Mickey Mouse movie where like they pause and they wait for you to respond. But anyways, here it goes. Why did Times New Roman get kicked out of the restaurant? Because his type wasn't served there. Huh? I'm just gonna assume you're laughing because I'm recording this ahead of time. But hey, what I want you to do right now, I will put up a little countdown thing for you guys. I want you to turn to someone and ask them this question. What is something on your bucket list? If you don't know what a bucket list is like the things that you want to do before you kick the bucket, before you pass away. What do you want to do? What's something that's on that bucket list that you really want to accomplish in your life? So take a couple of minutes. You'll see the timer pop up. Take a couple of minutes and do that with each other right now. All right, so we're gonna keep going. The first thing I wanna remind you guys of is the weekly scenarios. Yes, we still have one this week, so make sure you guys hop on there. Again, those are already put up, and then they are gonna be due Friday at midnight, Friday at 11:55 p.m. A lot of you had fun with that. Yes, that was a real logo last week. And this week we've got an infographic, all right? And you guys are gonna look at that infographic. Tell me what you would change, what you might do differently, and that kind of stuff. So don't forget to do that. That's due Friday by 11:55 p.m. And then again, just remember, pay attention. It's really important. By the way, all the slides that I go through today, are going to be on my WCS, and there's even a little video that you guys will watch on there and all that kind of stuff. So today, what we're talking about is typography, all right? Typography or type or font. Those are actually two different terms, and so we're going to be talking about that today. So the first thing that I want you guys to understand, that when we talk about type, you'll hear me use the word typefaces a lot, okay? There's really two main categories of typefaces, all right? The first category or classification of a typeface is called a serif, all right? And a serif font has small features on the end of the stroke. So like if you look at Times New Roman, it's not just a straight line, right? They have that little flourish at the end of each line, and that little flick right there at the end of those lines, that's actually called a serif, okay? So if it's a serif font, that means it has those things coming off of it, okay? So those are serif fonts. And then sans serif, sans means without, all right? That would be basically those block letters, right? If you see memes with the impact font that are on there, those are sans serif, without those little serifs, just very block or rounded or whatever it may be at the end of the strokes. Those features aren't there anymore. And we'll talk more about ascenders and descenders and baselines. If you guys look at the slide, you'll see a little picture that shows what those are. Obviously the baseline is where everything rests. The descenders is everything that goes below that, so like the bottom of a P, the bottom of a G, of a Y. And then the ascenders is anything that goes above that. So the leg of the H or capitalized letters, all that kind of stuff. Those are what go above there. So that's what we're really talking about. We're talking about type. All right, and it sounds really boring, and I'm gonna be honest with you. When I looked at my course curriculum or my course layout, and it said that I was gonna have a typography class, advanced typography, I did what all of you guys are doing. I rolled my eyes, I checked out. But it actually, funny enough, became one of my favorite classes. So I hope you guys enjoy it, because it is really cool, and it's a job in itself. You can actually be a full-time typographer where you create fonts. We'll get to that here in a minute. But just some other typography terms. All of these come from, they come from the printing press that Gutenberg invented like over 500 years ago. And so there's four big ones that I want you guys to know, okay? The first one that I want you to know, and I hope you guys are taking notes with all this stuff because this is testable material, all right? It's called leading, L-E-A-D-I-N-G, all right? And leading, that word actually comes from lead strips that they would put in between each line of text. And so leading is the space in between each line of type. So as you read and you go down the lines, that space in between right there is leading. So you can increase and decrease the leading, all right? The next one is tracking, okay? So tracking is the letter, or we call them characters, not really letters because there's more than just letters, but the character spacing, and the actual definition is the character spacing to make an optically consistent adjustment to the space between letters to change the visual density of a line or block of text. So when you change the leading, all right, when you change the tracking, you're taking the whole word, all right, and if you up the space, that means if you up the tracking, that means the same tracking is being adjusted in between each letter, all right, and then you can make it bigger and smaller. So the letters are further apart or closer together as a whole, right, as an entire word. And that's important. The reason why I clarify that is because the third term is called kerning, all right? So you have tracking. Tracking adjusts the entire word. Kerning is the spacing in between individual letters or characters, all right? So when you adjust the kerning, let me give you an example. If I have an O, right, and it's sitting next to a V, all right? If I adjust the kerning, what I'm doing is I'm bringing that O underneath that V, all right? So I'm adjusting the kerning just to make it look a little bit more balanced. Sometimes when you use certain typefaces, they're not made very well, and so they'll put that O on the edge of the V, and then that next letter looks closer to the O than it does to the V, and so it just doesn't look good. And so sometimes you can adjust what's called the kerning. So when you adjust the tracking, it's the whole word. When you adjust the kerning, it's just individual letters, if that makes sense. So they're both deal with spaces in between letters. One is the entire word, the other one is just the letters itself. And then the last one is the big bar on your computer. It's spacing, all right? And that's the space in between individual words. So you've got leading, that's the space in between each line. You have tracking, and that's close together letters or far apart letters. You have kerning, which is the individual space in between each letter that you can adjust individually, and you have spacing, which is how much space you put in between each word. All right, and all of that comes together to make the type that you're using look professional and consistent and not awkward, right? And if you push any of those too far, for example, if you get the leading way too far apart, it's really hard to read because your eye has to jump really far. If you spread the letters out too far with tracking, it's going to be really hard to read that word, all right? If you adjust too much with the kerning, it's going to look weird because it's going to look like everything just kind of got all crammed together, and you're not going to really be able to read it because it's super close. And then if you get the spacing wrong, it's going to be like leapfrog. You're going to have to jump way far to read the next word. All right. And so when we adjust the spacing overall, you want to watch for that to make sure that those things aren't in there, so you can kind of fix those issues, make it look nice and clean. All right. But there's a difference here. You hear me use the word type. You'll actually hear a lot of graphic designers use the word type. And that's because it's not the same thing as a font, okay? So as you look at this slide, fonts and typefaces are similar, and those words are used interchangeably all the time. Even I interchange those words sometimes. But a font is actually the variation of weights and styles within a typeface, okay? And then a typeface is the overall classification or family of the font. So think of like the typeface as the umbrella, right? And then the fonts are all the different ways that typeface looks, right? So for example, band shrift, that's a really common typeface. You'll actually see that even on Microsoft Word, all right? And there's a ton of fonts within band shrift. So band shrift is the actual typeface, all right? But there's band shrift light, there's band shrift semi-bold, there's band shrift semi-bold condensed, there's band shrift light italic. There's all kinds of different variations of that typeface. So when we talk about the variations, those are fonts, right? And basically a font is technically a software that your computer reads so that it knows how to actually make that typeface look, right? Whereas the typeface itself is something that is developed and is a whole classification, right? So Arial, right? Arial would be a typeface. Arial light and Arial bold would be fonts, if that makes sense, all right? So know that when I use those words interchangeably, it can kind of get confusing. When we talk about a typeface, we're really talking about one family that you might be using in all of its different variations throughout whatever you're making, all right? But where did it all start? There's a little bit of history behind all of this. Right now we have thousands upon thousands, over hundreds of thousands of different typefaces that are out there. And like I said, people can do this full time, but it hasn't always been that way, all right? For a long time, things were handwritten. People were scribes. That was their job full time, and they would handwrite things, and it took forever to make copies of books. It really did. It took a really long time. And so finally, this big German guy, Johannes Gutenberg, comes along, and he reinvents, he kind of takes a wine press and he kind of turns it into what he calls a printing press so that he can print books. Little side note that's kind of fun, where we get the terms uppercase and lowercase are actually from that printing press. When you had the printing press, there were cases where all the little die-cast molds of each letter were held. And so the big letters were in the uppercase, the small letters were in the lowercase, all right? With his typeface, the typeface that he made, it was called blackletter, all right? And blackletter was really bold, all right? It was really thick. Gutenberg's letter forms are oftentimes called Gothic or Fracture or Old English, right? They were really big, right? Old manuscripts, really, really intense, really, really big, black in your face, all right? And this is a typeface that is recognizable by its dramatic thin and thick strokes, and in some fonts, the elaborate swirls and serifs, all right? They kind of go all over the place. If you kind of see the example there with Lordish, right? It's very old English looking, right? Very kind of thick and bold, right? And so this is a good typeface to use for like headlines and things like that. But as you can see, man, it's like what I would say is loud, right? Man, like it looks like it's screaming and it's a lot to look at, and it's actually hurts your eyes to read for long amounts of time. And so somebody came along and they took blackletter, right? Because blackletter, It's a lot of ink. It took up a lot of space. And so people tried to develop typefaces that would provide more words for less real estate. And when I say real estate, I mean how many more words can we fit onto one page, right? Because we're gonna make more money the more information we can provide. But if we provide a lot of information and we use black letter, it's gonna be spread out all over the place. And so in 1470, Nicholas Jensen created the first Roman typeface. You guys know, like Times New Roman? It's a Roman typeface, right? The typeface is Roman. Times New Roman would be a font that's in there, all right? While Jensen's Roman typeface saved space on the printed page, others were trying to save even more space and efficiency with book printing. In 1501, a couple of guys created the first italic typeface, where they're kind of leaning to the side, all right, which allowed even more text to fit onto one page, all right? So now we have Roman typeface, which is still a serif typeface. It still has those little swooshes at the end, but it was a little bit thinner. They had thinner and thicker lines that kind of varied, and it saved space. And then people kind of missed that handwritten touch, right? And so what they did was they made this Roman typeface italicized, because when you make it italic, you could fit more together, right? Because you can adjust the kerning and bring them closer together without it looking awkward, but then it also looks almost handwritten sometimes, right? We oftentimes use italic things for captions or to add emphasis if you're writing a book or whatever it may be. But that's actually why it was invented. It was made to make it look more relatable, more hand-drawn, handwritten, but then also to save space. It was actually made to save real estate, all right? And then from there, they want to save even more. And so we get this idea of transitional or old style, right? From here, there was a large need for things to be readable, all right? And this led to the development of what is known as old style. Old style included more contrast between strokes in each letter form, all right? If you go to your Microsoft Word and you see Baskerville as your font, well, that's John Baskerville. He took this a step further in 1757, and he created what's called transitional typefaces with more distinct letter forms. His typefaces were blacker than that of other people's, and they were actually criticized due to the thickness of the strokes, saying that he would be responsible for blinding the nation, right? He made his a little bit thicker, and it said, oh my gosh, it's so much ink to look at. Well, what's crazy is when you look at this one, it's nothing compared to black letter, right? Where they first started. That was really loud, right? Really, really bold, really hard to read. But again, this transitional old style was, again, it was making it easier to read, right? Again, a more comfortable reading experience. And then we want to make that experience even easier, even though it's not, but we'll get to that more later. Now we enter into this world of sans serif typefaces, right? And the reason why sans serif, without the little flourishes, sans without, we get these, and I know I'm jumping way forward in history, there's a lot in between here, but these were actually influenced by block lettering, and they were really common in advertising during the Industrial Revolution because they're bold and you can see them from far away, right? So we hit the Industrial Revolution, we hit the World Wars, and now people want you to see their ad. They want you to see their poster, right? And so they make these sans serif typefaces that could be big and bold, and they're easy to see, right? And this is still used today. You can see that that big word treason, right, on that little poster right there. Well, that makes me want to look at that like, treason, oh my gosh, what happened, right? But then even now, when we look at these computer screens and these other infographics, this sans serif typeface is bold and it's bright, and it makes me want to look at it, and I can read it from far away. And so that's where even today we kind of go, right? And when we use these sans serif typefaces, we use these more so, not necessarily for captions, sometimes we do, but we'll use these for like so headlines sometimes, or really the body text is really where you'll use sans serif typefaces, because it can be read when it's really small and it can be read when it's really big. It's really adaptable. Where it gets a little weird is with this idea of display fonts. And as you can see on this slide, there's all kinds of different flourishing fonts, right? With these weird letter forms, and some of them look handwritten, some of them look oldish but newish at the same time. Some of them make you feel like you're in a haunted house, like Chiller and that kind of stuff. And these display typefaces are what we use today, and it's kind of like you're taking, again, that idea of it looking aesthetically appealing and functional, and slamming them together. Designers realized the power of the written word and the power of imagery and began to mash them together for dramatic effect. And this really affects all areas of art. I have this little thing here, but type changes things. If you see the same exact sentence right here, free hugs inside, free hugs inside, free hugs inside. Now I don't know about you, but if I saw the first one, free hugs inside, that's either like a kids ministry thing, or it's like, you know, a hippie, go with what you feel. Free hugs inside, if it's written in chiller, I'm definitely not going there for a free hug. That's really scary. And then free hugs inside at the bottom is just kind of boring, sans serif. It's not really a lot going on, right? But that's what these display fonts did, right? The form of typography really amplified the meaning of the text. And so if I could change the text to match the feeling of what I'm going for, well, now it's even more relatable, right? The message really becomes more powerful when the words and the images kind of match together. But then as well, when you use a logo, logos are one of the ways that type is used to imprint an association in the mind that has an emotional component. So for example, it can appeal to nostalgia, right? If it looks older, or maybe it looks handwritten, like Arm & Hammer, for example. And it looks like a really old logo with older font typefaces, right? That's what they're appealing for. They're appealing for that nostalgia. Or hand-drawn lettering can really kind of lay down a layer of humor, right? And more relaxed looking. If you look at how they changed the packaging on this brand right here with the nuts and nuts.com and nuts online, all that kind of stuff. When you look at the right side, we would say that looks more modern, right? More relatable, more fun, more lighthearted, that kind of thing. And so, man, really things transform when you change the letter form. But here's the thing, you have to be so careful. Just like anything in graphic design, you want to push things, but you don't want to push them too far, right? You don't want it to be mundane and normal. You want to push things, but don't push them too far. There's some pitfalls to avoid. For example, remember, less is more. All right, combinations of effects can really be overwhelming. If you have shadows and beveling and it's outline and all this kind of stuff, it's hard on the eyes. You're gonna be responsible for, like he said, blinding the nation, all right? But then also know where what you're designing is gonna go. You have to know where it's gonna go, because for example, it could cast shadows that'll make it really hard to read. Or it could be on an awkward corner, and your design that you thought was gonna look actually really cool is really not strategic at all, and it doesn't fit that environment. So you have to make sure that your physical type is gonna fit the environment that it's going in, especially if it's gonna be in 3D space, right? In real world application, like a sign or something like that. So you'll do site surveys. You'll go out and look at where it's gonna go to make sure your design is gonna be legible at a distance. It's gonna match the environment. It's gonna work well together, all right? And then just some parting things that are really important to be mindful of. A good typeface is one that works in all modes, right? A good typeface can be used large, small, regular caps, small caps, we'll get to what those are, condensed, far apart. That's what makes a really good typeface. But if you can't find that one typeface to use all across the board, especially when you create a brand manual, you'll have a specific typeface for headlines, a specific typeface for subheaders, a specific typeface for body text, and a specific typeface for captions that you know will work, and then you let the company know that, so that way they know how to use it too. And then if you're creating a typeface, to avoid any legal struggles, which we'll get to here in a minute, hand drawing is always really good. It's a really valuable thing to do. It's harder than you would think to create a typeface, but hand drawing is always a really good bet. If you base it off of something and make it your own, that's always a really good bet because it's unique, right? And a lot of places today, they want to look unique. They want to stand out. But here's the hard part. The biggest struggle with that is that, man, it's overpopulated. There's over 150 to 200,000 typefaces. So what's gonna make yours stand out, right? And you also want to avoid using typefaces that are too commonly used, because it's just gonna be white noise. I'll get to that here in a second. But go to free font sites sometimes. They're not really good or bad, right? It just depends on how you're gonna use them, but let me warn you with this, make sure you're using them legally. If you just download a free font and then you try and put it into your book and you start selling your book, well, that might have been a trial version of that font, okay? Strictly speaking, a font, remember, it's different than font typeface. A font is a computer's file. It's a software or a program that instructs your computer to display and print each letter or character in a certain way. The typeface, on the other hand, is the set of letters and all that stuff. So if I start sharing the font with other people, for example, if I tell a company, this is your font, and here's the file. Well, I have just committed piracy. I have now given them software for free, all right? Even though I own it, you tell them what that is and then they go buy it. You can't just send your client the font, all right? Unless the end user license agreement, the EULE, actually says that you can, all right? There's some that are commonly used, all right? So you've got to make sure they know it and they purchase it, all right? Yeah, you can use it, but they need to know what they need to purchase, where they can purchase it. They need to have a copy of that end license agreement. And again, it needs to stand out, okay? If you look at this last slide with me, you need to avoid these on the left side. Try to avoid Comic Sans, Times New Roman, Lucida handwriting, Papyrus, Impact, Kristen, all those. They're used too much, all right? They're too cookie cutter and it's gonna be white noise. But there's some alternatives, right? Always look up alternatives. They're gonna make it look fresh and new. And it's gonna stand out. What's gonna make them stand out compared to everybody else? And we'll talk about that with everything. What colors will make you stand out? What type will make you stand out? What imagery will make yours stand out, especially in the logo, okay? So type is a really, really influential thing, and there's a lot packed in it. I really encourage you guys at this point, please go back through and look through those slides, look through the PowerPoint again, because there's a video that I want you guys to watch, and I will ask you if you guys watched it, all right? But it's an important thing, and on Thursday, we're actually gonna get to play with the type tools and stuff in Illustrator, so you guys can actually see how influential type can be and the difference between a type and an image and all that good stuff, okay? So at this point, if you have questions, shoot me a message on Microsoft Teams, okay? I still have access to my phone, so shoot me a message on Microsoft Teams if you have any questions. Please head on to MyWCS. Click on the topic for this week, and the PowerPoint that I just went through will be on there, and please go through there, take extra notes if you missed anything, and watch the video at the very beginning. I think it's like the 3rd or 4th slide or something like that. Watch that video. It'll give you a little bit more information. And then when I come back on Thursday, we will actually hit the ground running and actually start using the software. Hopefully everybody's gonna be able to get into the software and we'll be able to start using it. And it'll be really, really awesome. So if you don't have any questions, make sure that your 8 principles thing is turned in. You can also work on your design scenarios. This is after you look at the PowerPoint. Remember, you're gonna watch that PowerPoint, all right, and watch that video. But after that, make sure that you can work on your design scenario, make sure your 8 principles thing is done and turned in, including the link and the 10 sentences that you're gonna do on one design, because that was due last week. And then send me any questions that you might have as you're more curious about this. And then if you're absolutely done with all of that, then I encourage you guys to have human time, all right? Interact with other people around you. Don't just close off, okay? I appreciate you guys so much. I'm so sorry that I can't be there, but I hope this helped. Me actually getting to do the lecture for you guys. I hope that really helped. I will post this video onto MyWCS as well if you need to review it again. It's better than just a little Zoom thing. But again, step 1, go through and study, don't just look at, study that PowerPoint, take the notes that you need for the test that's gonna come up. There's a lot of info in this lecture that's gonna be on the test, all right? Do your design scenario if you want to for this week, it's a fun one. And then shoot me any questions that you have on Microsoft Teams, and make sure your 8 design principles project from last week is turned in, all right? Have a good rest of your day. Sub wherever you are, if you're over there, or back there, or maybe back there. I don't know where you're standing, but thank you so much for helping me out today. And I will see you guys on Thursday. See you later.